Welcome to Coffee with the Supervisor. My special guest today is Paule Pachter, who is the Executive Director of Long Island Care. So when you think about people who are in need of food, which is a basic need, and you think about a charity that reaches out and works to feed the hungry, there is no larger, no more extensive organization on Long Island than Long Island Cares. Tell us a little bit about Long Island Cares. How many people do you serve? How big are you? How did it get started? Well, we know it got started through Harry Chapin.
Correct.
So let's talk a little bit about Harry Chapin.
Sure. Well, in 1980, as you may remember, Harry Chapin founded Long Island Cares as the very first food bank in the Long Island region.
Right.
Initially, when he set out to do this, he approached both the Nassau and Suffolk County executives to see if they would support the operation, as well as the governor at the time, and he was able to raise $75,000. $25,000 from Nassau, same from Suffolk, same from New York State, except New York State gave him 2 buildings on the grounds of Pilgrim Psychiatric Center. That was the only state property at the time. But that was 42 years ago, and Long Island Cares has grown. We now have not only our own building with our warehouse in Hauppauge, but 7 other locations.
Including Melville.
Across the island. Well, we have, no, ours is Hauppauge, Freeport, Lindenhurst, Huntington Station, Hampton Bays, and the new Essential Market in Bethpage.
Wow. So you dotted all over the island.
Well, because we try to make sure that we're able to deliver nutritious food to people in need conveniently where they're located. As you know, Long Island Care supports about 324 local organizations. They are the soup kitchens, the food pantries, the daycare centers, Head Start programs. And in order for us to deliver approximately 13 million pounds of food a year to the network, it's easier for us to have a physical presence, especially in high-need communities. So about 11 years ago, we set out to develop these satellite locations. All of them are on main streets in local communities. Each of them have office space, conference room space, and each of them has a fully stocked food pantry, emergency food pantry. And we want the public to come to us if they're experiencing food insecurity for the very first time. And we've seen a lot of that in the last 3 years.
Well, tell me what the pandemic has done now for Long Island Cares. It must have put a huge burden on you. How many people do you actually serve in a given year?
On an average year, we serve approximately 250,000 people.
That's a lot, a quarter of a million people. That's a lot of
people.
Lot of people to feed.
Yes,
and you do that not only through your organization, but all the other not-for-profits that depend on you to supply them food.
Correct.
So that they can serve, like, local church, whatever groups, or other groups that serve this.
Absolutely. The network, as we refer to it, is the backbone of the regional food bank. During the first 2 years of the COVID pandemic, we served an additional 280,000 people.
I can only imagine.
Yep.
We, in the town of Brookhaven, we had senior citizens that were in nutrition programs that had to close down during the pandemic. Fortunately, Florian Food Service, which operates our cafeteria, we contracted with them. We were serving about 500, almost 550 hot meals a day, 5 days a week to our seniors. And that was a huge effort just to do that, to make sure that they had hot meals. I think we gave them frozen ones for the weekend, but it was 5 days a week. We did hot meals, about 550 senior citizens. Huge effort. I can only imagine what a quarter of a million. Of course, a lot of your food that you do serve, it's not hot.
Right.
It's non-perishables, cans, pasta, things of that nature.
You know our business too well. So anyway, in response to your question, during COVID, the numbers went from 250 to 480.
Oof.
That was almost impossible to deal with. However, we received so much support from local government. Town of Brookhaven was part of the response, the town of Babylon, the town of Hempstead. We had opened up 25 temporary pop-up food distribution centers, all within the town of Hempstead. And then we worked closely with Suffolk County and other townships to do home delivery of food.
Well, we had urged Suffolk County to give you some of that CARES money.
They did.
I'm happy that they did and that they shared that money, because there is no more basic need than food, clothing, and shelter. And if you don't have food, that is a huge concern. And, you know, I read somewhere where a large portion of particularly kids from poor homes were going to school hungry.
Right. Yeah.
And what happened is you could qualify for a breakfast and a lunch at school, and you even qualified for weekend take-home food at school. But when the schools closed down with the pandemic, that only increased the problem and the pressure, I'm sure, on Long Island CARES and all the food banks on Long Island.
We, as you can imagine, we were working 7 days a week. You mentioned the children, you know, schools are closed, or schools are, you know, trying to deliver meals to the kids in their parking lots when this is going on. And we have 2 food trucks that go out into the community specifically to serve children. And there are 79,000 children on Long Island who struggle with food insecurity. And if not for the schools, they and their families would have been left high and dry.
Right.
But we worked with a number of school districts to make sure that the food got to the children. Certainly, many of the temporary pop-up distribution sites we opened up were at senior centers. They were literally at municipal housing programs that, you know, for seniors. So we had the community room to distribute through. So we were able to come out of it stronger, I believe, and more organized than even before, because this was something that no one had ever experienced before. You know, food banks all over the country, you saw the, you know, images on television of the line stretching around parking lots. We were fortunate because we didn't have to do any of that, because we had these stationary locations, so people were able to come to us. But we also, during the first 2 years of COVID, hired 25 additional staff people to go out and do the
additional
outreach.
Expenses, so this really must have stretched your resources.
It did, but on the other side of the coin, we have never seen the corporate community, the philanthropic community, and Long Islanders themselves be so generous as they were during the first year, year and a half of COVID.
As I'm sure you hope they continue to be.
Well, thankfully, to be honest with you, 46% of them are still with us today.
That's great.
That's remarkable.
If an average citizen, like listening to this program on Channel 18, said, you know what, I'd like to help Long Island CARES, how would they do that?
Well, there's many ways they could help Long Island CARES. First and foremost, we'd love when the community comes to us to ask to volunteer.
Right.
Or people could, you know, make a donation, or they can sponsor
If they wanted to make a
food drive.
donation, how would they make the donation?
Well, they would go online to our website at licares.org.
Okay.
They can walk into any one of our 8 locations on Long Island and make a donation.
Write a check or...
Write a check, show us your credit card. If you're still carrying cash in 2022, be my guest.
Right. But not cryptocurrency.
Not yet.
Not yet.
We're set up to accept it, but we're taking it very slow.
Okay. But so they could do that, and hopefully people continue to do that, because the need is great. Tell me about what the inflation is now doing to your operation and to the budget of families that are struggling with food insecurity.
Yeah, so that's a wonderful question. We are seeing about a 35% increase in the cost of the food that we purchase.
Right.
Of the 13 million pounds that we distribute and deliver every year, we purchase about 70% of it through our state contract, through our contract with the USDA, because we have the funding to purchase food. And not only are we looking at a 35% increase in the cost, we're also looking at delays in the supply chain in terms of delivering food to us. Prior to COVID, we would place an order, and within 2 weeks, the truckload would be outside our warehouse. during COVID, it was taking 12 to 18 weeks till we got the food.
I believe it. When my wife goes to the supermarket, she tells me,
yeah.
"Oh, you know the thing that you asked for? They don't have it." I said, "They've always had it. They don't have it now." They said, maybe in a few weeks they would get it. So the supply chain seems to be, and we're moving hopefully out of the pandemic, although it seems to remind us every so often, I'm back. But we're moving out of it, and still we have supply chain problems, and with inflation, the cost of food has skyrocketed. Don't try to buy a steak. You know, so trying to have a balanced diet.
We're seeing what we're also seeing now in the community, Supervisor Romaine, is the numbers going up again in terms of the people. We predicted about 3 months ago, we were looking at the inflationary rate. We measured what our costs were. You could only imagine what it's costing to put diesel fuel in our trucks these days.
Absolutely.
Close to $7 a gallon. Thank goodness for Suffolk County that provides us with the gas. We have now seen in the last 2 months, 3 months, an additional 35,000 people. And you hit the nail on the head. These are working class Long Islanders. They're working 2 jobs, 3 jobs to make ends meet. And because of the rising cost of gas, the average supermarket basket, cost of health care, insurance now for your car, they're just struggling. And that's where Long Island Cares does our best work. Because about 30 to 35% of all the people that come into the network for food are hard-working Long Islanders.
Low to moderate income individuals that work, but their paycheck isn't covering or rising fast enough to deal with inflation. They can't buy some of the basics in terms of food or medical services. If they get sick, their co-pays are high. They have all types of problems. This is a very difficult time for a lot of Long Islanders. And believe me, Brookhaven Town, some of our sister towns to the east may have some wealthy occupants. We're basically a middle-class town with a number of low to moderate income areas where people really struggle to pay their taxes, to maintain their house, to pay for car insurance, health insurance, to cover the cost of groceries. It's so difficult.
You're absolutely right. You know, 42 years ago, when I entered the human services field here on Long Island, one of my assignments was to do a comparison between Hempstead and Garden City. And I did the comparison. 2
very different towns.
Very, very different. But I remember distinctly over the years, the person I always tell the story about is Assemblyman Fred Thiel. When I met him for the first time.
My assemblyman.
Yep. We spoke about pockets of poverty on Long Island, that we knew where there were communities that were socioeconomically disadvantaged from others. Fast forward to 2022, and I think you'll agree, there are pockets of affluence on Long Island. But for the majority of Long Islanders, these are hard-working, struggling families who would love to live on the beach in Southampton, would love to live on the Gold Coast, but they can't. And for all the reasons you just put out.
Well, they struggle with all the costs that life imposes on them.
Sure.
It's a difficult thing. But this is where Long Island Cares is so important, because you fill a need that is so vital to Long Island and its people. People are hungry. No one wants to see a child go hungry.
Of course not.
No one wants to see an elderly person go hungry. People now retiring who've retired, we're living longer. Social Security is not covering what inflation is stealing from them. And they just can't make it all the time. And that's a concern about where we're going as a nation even. But forgetting that larger issue, we've done a very good job. You've done a very good job on filling a tremendous need that exists on this island. Long Island Cares. And we just had, forget a food drive. The town of Brookhaven just had a pet drive.
Right.
Because there's a lot of people who have pets that's the first thing they, if we have to cut back, we're not feeding, Fido.
Yeah.
But, dog food. So we're providing cat and dog food and other animal food. We had a food drive to do that because sometimes that's forgotten.
Absolutely.
And we run an animal shelter, so we know what that means. In times that are tough, people abandon their animals that are sheltered. So sad to see it because they just can't afford it.
And that's exactly the reason why we opened up the pet pantry. It's in Lindenhurst, Baxter's Pet Pantry. But all of our satellite locations, the pantries that are located there, all carry pet food. Of our 325 member agencies, over 200 of them order pet food on a regular basis. And the wonderful part of the whole operation with the pet food is that we haven't purchased 1 penny's worth of food. It's all donated. Not only from people like live in the town, but from the pet food industry. We get donations every other week whenever we ask for them.
Which is great because when you think about it, look, I have a little dog. He's so happy when I come home. I feel great. Pets are part of our lives. But I so appreciate, and one of the reasons that we're talking about this is I so appreciate what Long Island Cares does.
Thank you.
And I would encourage everyone that's listening, whether you're an individual or corporation or whatever, to think about making a major contribution to Long Island Cares so we help those who are facing hunger issues. That should not be on this island.
I agree.
You know, if we all chip in, we can help one another. So,
absolutely.
Paul, I want to thank you for being my guest. I know we ran a little bit over, but I thought it was important to get a message out about how important Long Island Cares is and what it does and how it helps Long Island in every way. So thank you so much.
Appreciate the opportunity.
Absolutely.